All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight, presented by FanDuel here at The Volume. Happy Thursday, everybody. We've almost made it to the end of the week. This show is going to be a little bit different than most of the stuff that we've done over the course of this season. It's going to be entirely focused around a hypothetical trade. So, I know that sounds crazy, but it gives us a chance to talk about two teams that are kind of struggling right now. And I find this particular trade very interesting. So, last night, I was just talking with a buddy of mine named Sam. Sam covers the Warriors with light years. Those of you guys who listen to that show, him and Andy do an amazing job covering that team. I love their engagement with the fans. It's a very engaging show, and they're all also really smart basketball minds as well. And I was bouncing my big trade idea off of Sam, that idea being Darius Garland for OG Anunoby, which I think makes so much sense on so many different levels for both of those teams. And he came back at me with a trade involving the Los Angeles Lakers and the Phoenix Suns that I thought about a lot this morning, and I think it makes a ton of sense. So what we're going to do today is we're going to dive into that trade from a bunch of different angles, and I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. If you think it's insane, tell me in the comments. If you dislike it for one reason or another, if you tweak it in any way, put that in the comments as well, and I'll check that out later tonight. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Volume's YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. Then last but not least, if for whatever reason you guys miss one of these shows and you can't get back over to YouTube to finish, remember you can find them wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. So foundationally, the reason why this trade makes sense is both of these teams, the Suns and the Lakers, are in crisis mode. The Phoenix Suns were the runaway best team in the NBA last year. They won 64 games. Then they started hot this year. They started 15-6, which was the third best record in basketball when the calendar flipped over to December. But then December happened, and they've been 5-10 during this month, which is the fifth worst record in the league. Their defense has completely fallen apart. They have the 27th best defensive rating in the league in December, and they have slipped all the way down to fifth in the West. And now they're going to be without Devin Booker, who's their best player, for at least a month. But more importantly, and this is the big reason why I view the Suns as in crisis mode, because when you look at the standings, they're not that far back. But more importantly, we've seen the ceiling of this team. We know fundamentally that when you have Booker and Paul with DeAndre Ayton and the role players that they have, even with all the talent they have down the roster, at the very highest levels, when they play against the best players in the world, there seems to be a ceiling to what they can do. Booker and Paul have not been able to rise to that level. So I think they are in full crisis mode, and I think that they'd probably be more willing to break things apart than people realize. Then we have the Lakers, who lost to Miami last night. They're now 14-21. They're still playing solid basketball with LeBron on the floor, but they can't do a damn thing on either end of the floor when he's off the floor. After the game, LeBron said, quote, "I am a winner, and I want to win and give myself a chance to win and still compete for a championship. Playing basketball at this level just to be playing basketball is not in my DNA. It's not in my DNA anymore," end quote. So LeBron now starting to basically publicly come out and imply that he's not happy with where the roster's at. And now they're in this weird predicament where they're so far down in the standings that things look kind of bleak even with Anthony Davis returning in a few weeks. We had a report a couple days ago that Anthony Davis is not feeling any pain in his foot, and 7 to 10 days from now, they're going to reevaluate him and probably ramp him back up. But this idea that, the Warriors are going to probably not do anything, that's something that we kind of saw coming into the season. They set the team up for failure, then they'd fail, then they wouldn't do anything. We're not going to hash that out again. We've hashed that a million times on this show. But Sam proposed a trade between the Suns and the Lakers that I think makes an alarming amount of sense for both teams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys the framework of the trade. Then I'm going to look at it from the Lakers' perspective, and then I'm going to look at it from the Suns' perspective. So the framework of this trade would be Anthony Davis to the Suns and Jay Crowder, DeAndre Ayton, and 3 first-round picks to the Lakers. So now there's a couple of caveats first. So the trade cannot be executed till January 15th. Per the CBA rules surrounding the new deal that Ayton signed. And DeAndre Ayton would have veto power over any trade for the rest of this season. Although I doubt DeAndre Ayton would veto a Lakers trade. Why? Well, let's just talk about what his role would look like with the Lakers. Obviously, it's great to go to LA. I also think he'd just be used a lot more there. So first of all, with the Lakers, I'm a huge believer in the LeBron and Anthony Davis core when they're healthy, as you guys know. When Anthony Davis is actually good the way he was over the course of this season and not kind of disengaged and out of shape the way he was the previous 2 seasons, when Anthony Davis is playing like that and LeBron James is playing the way he's been playing, you saw what happened when they went into Milwaukee and beat the Bucks. They still have a ceiling as high as anybody else in the league. But this is the 3rd consecutive season that Anthony Davis has suffered a significant injury, causing him to miss significant time. And I also think he's had a huge workload in Los Angeles because of the roster limitations that has exacerbated that particular issue. Then we look at DeAndre Ayton. DeAndre Ayton is a super talented 24-year-old player that immediately gives you a legit center to build your defensive foundation on. Yes, he's had some issues with missing games himself, but not nearly to the extent that Anthony Davis has had, and he's younger. He's 24 years old, so it's far more likely that he'll be available in the coming years than Anthony Davis has been. And most importantly, and this is a big part of it, I think DeAndre Ayton's capable of a lot more offensive creation than what he's shown in Phoenix. They're a pick-and-roll offense with 2 outstanding pick-and-roll ball handlers. The vast majority of their offensive organization is geared towards those guards and not towards getting DeAndre Ayton touches. He does get touches, but they're typically as a roll man or as a pop man, not usually in the post. When he does get the ball in the post, he's been good. He scored 1.02 points per possession on post-ups, which is really solid. That's 16th in the league among players who have attempted at least 50 shots on post-ups. He's also shooting 46% on jumpers this year, including 39% from 3, albeit on low volume. I think when DeAndre gets into his late 20s, he's going to be a very reliable jump shooter on volume. He's already a pretty dependable jump shooter right now on lower volume. He's not a perfect player. Like, he can take some possessions off. We know he can be pouty. He can have bad defensive games. But, I also want to cut him some slack because clearly he doesn't want to be in Phoenix. He went out and signed with another team. And Phoenix made him come back with an arrangement that's in the CBA to protect your draft rights, so I don't have any problem with it. But make no mistake, the Suns don't really want him, and he doesn't really want to be there. So I think that probably factors into his behavior a little bit. That said, I do believe it's a little bit in his personality where he could take some possessions and games off and have a bad attitude from time to time. But to zoom out, DeAndre Ayton is very, very good. And he probably will get much better. That's just a fact at this point. What would the Lakers do with DeAndre Ayton if they got him in that kind of trade? So there's basically 2 directions you can go from there. Because we got to look at it like this. You're also getting Jay Crowder in that deal, who's not my favorite wing in the world, but with how I say thin, the Lakers do not have wings. They just don't. So even though Crowder's not my favorite wing in the world, he would immediately fill a very specific roster need and make them a lot better in that specific area of their roster. And with the influx of 3 first-round picks, you would now have 5 tradable first-round picks within this season. So from there, you'd have 2 directions you could go as the Lakers. You could win now with LeBron. You have a solid front court rotation there with LeBron, DeAndre Ayton, Jay Crowder, and Thomas Bryant. You flip Russell Westbrook, Patrick Beverley, Kendrick Nunn, and all of those draft picks for as much talent as you possibly can find. I'd call the Wizards and try to throw Russ in 3, 4, 5 picks to try to get Bradley Beal. You could call the Pistons and try to get Bojan Bogdanovic. You could call the Jazz and try to get some real shooting that they don't really have on the roster. You could call Charlotte and try to get some of the younger athletic wings. They have over $60 million in tradable salary that doesn't really touch their core players and 5 draft picks. There's a lot you can do there and still have Austin Reeves, Lonnie Walker, Dennis Schroeder, LeBron James, DeAndre Ayton, Jay Crowder. It'd still have like a little foundation to pair with whatever you can bring back in the trade market. And the key there is LeBron has been a top 5 player in the world over the last 5 weeks. In his last 17 games, he's averaging 30 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists on 61% true shooting, which is outrageous box score production. And the Lakers are outscoring teams by 5 points per 100 possessions over that span when LeBron is on the floor, with arguably the worst supporting cast in the league. So as ridiculous as it might sound, when we're talking about retooling around a guy who's 38 years old, it's a legitimate option that's on the table. But the second option there is full rebuild. If you do nothing, or if you trade Anthony Davis this season and you don't invest in him after that, LeBron will probably request a trade in this offseason. Now, that's a whole separate conversation because that'll be a really ugly moment in Lakers history for LeBron's first trade request to be before his 21st season. And there's a case to be made that that big of a fiasco would make it very difficult for the Lakers to bring in stars in the future, because as long as Rob Pelinka's at the helm, they won't get anybody. But even if they fired Rob Pelinka and brought somebody else in, Jeanie Buss is now the poorest owner in the NBA. And as we know, when you want to compete at the highest levels on a year-by-year basis, you have to be willing to dip into the tax. And Jeanie Buss let Alex Caruso go, a player that would be monumentally helpful to them, for $10 million a year, obviously with a luxury tax of $30, but Jeanie Buss can't foot that bill. She's the poorest owner in the NBA. So, this whole thing going up in flames would be a disaster for Jeanie Buss, which is precisely why it's so important for her to project competency during this phase. But if they did decide to go the whole rebuild route, even at LeBron's age, he still has some kind of value, and he would bring back some kind of asset return. How much, we don't know. I mean, LeBron being this good at his age is so unprecedented that we don't really have anything to fall back on there. I don't really have any idea what he would fetch. I mean, I would imagine on the low end of the spectrum, you're going to get a combination of 2 young players and picks, whether that's 2 young players or 2 firsts or 1 player, 1 first. I would think that would be the low end, potentially more if LeBron finishes the year healthy. But let's just say for the sake of argument that it's 2 first-round picks, okay? That puts you, because at that point, they also get another draft pick going into next season that's tradable. So going into next season, they would then have 8, I can't get my fingers right, 8 tradable first-round draft picks. Crowder isn't expiring, so he'd be off the books. All you'd have on the cap sheet would be DeAndre Ayton, who's a max contract, but an affordable and tradable max contract. He only makes 32 next year, 34 the following, 36 the year after that. Damian Jones has a player option for $2.6 million. Max Christie is on the books for $1.7 million, which is very little. So if you flip LeBron after the season, you've got a ton of draft picks to work with and an open cap sheet, or there's another direction you can go. Because if they trade LeBron, there's 2 directions they can go. You can target expiring contracts for cap flexibility, in which case you're probably going to get less in the way of draft compensation. Like maybe it's expiring contracts, but you only get 1 first-round pick, or 1 first-round pick and a second-round pick, right? But the other route you can go is you take on salary with draft picks, and you use that salary partnered with those 8 draft picks to go trade for a star. Like we talked about earlier, the incompetency that the Lakers have demonstrated to the league will make it hard for them to get stars. So having draft capital that you can pair up with salary is actually a good thing for them, especially in the modern NBA where that's turned out kind of one of the better ways to get stars in the first place. So no matter what, you have like some real flexibility there with lots of draft picks and either cap space or salary filler. That leaves 2 interesting options for the Lakers. You can win now with Ayton, or you can go the full rebuild route. Looking over at the Suns, Crowder isn't with the team right now, so there's no real loss there. Phoenix clearly doesn't like Ayton. Like we talked about earlier, it's mutual unhappiness. And Anthony Davis, when healthy this year, was one of the 5 best players in basketball. He's been the best defensive player in the league this year when he was available. He rediscovered his jump shot during this recent run, which was making him a terrifying ISO and post-up threat. And in Phoenix's pick and roll attack, which is basically the lion's share of where they run their offense, he'd be a much better version of Ayton. He's a better vertical spacer. He's a better passer out of the short roll. He's got better hands. DeAndre Ayton also has great hands, but Anthony Davis's ability to catch and finish in pick and roll is insane. And he's better at beating switches. 16 players in the league this year have logged at least 75 roll man possessions, and AD is second in the league on a points per possession basis at 1.37. Trivia, who's first? It's Christian Wood. That's with the Lakers team, too, that's so devoid of talent that Anthony Davis is typically catching in traffic surrounded by 2 or 3 bodies at a time. So I think he significantly raises Phoenix's ceiling on both ends of the floor. But most importantly, he gives Phoenix a player that can go toe-to-toe with the best players in the world. They ran into Giannis, and Giannis was too much for them. They ran into Luka, and Luka was too much for them. This year, it'll be someone else. Do you want to have Anthony Davis on your team so that you can look eye to eye with that guy and feel like you like your chances? Or do you want to have a repeat of the same history that we've had over the last couple of seasons? I've seen Anthony Davis give Nikola Jokic fits and outplay him in a playoff series. I've seen Anthony Davis give Joel Embiid fits. I've seen Anthony Davis give Giannis Antetokounmpo fits. He's that ultimate ceiling raising piece that the Suns need. And because of his injury history, he's gettable in a way that Kevin Durant is not. And that's what I think makes him so interesting. I've seen a lot of Suns fans saying like, oh, we should go get Kyle Kuzma. And I really like Kyle Kuzma, and I think that he would really help a team with legitimate title aspirations. But specifically for the Suns, I don't think it raises their ceiling enough because the stars are still the issue. But most importantly, if you make that trade, it kind of resets the culture. Like ever since that loss to Luka, the Suns have had a weird energy around them. And a lot of that, I think, stems from the negativity of the Ayton relationship. So not only does it make you much better within this season because you alleviate some of that negativity, but then you kind of have an interesting core to move forward with between Devin Booker and Cam Johnson, who I really like, and Anthony Davis. That's a really interesting core that you can build even new teams around in the future. So to me, I think it makes a lot of sense for both teams. Gives the Lakers some options to potentially contend in the immediate future and to contend in the future. And I think it gives the Suns a real championship ceiling that they've lacked over the last couple of years. So I think it makes sense. Obviously, with any of these trades, there's a great deal of unlikelihood just because of the fact that so many things have to break right for a trade to get consummated. But I'm really interested to hear what you guys think. So if you guys think it's stupid, tell me. If you don't like it for one team more than the other, tell me. If you would tweak it in any way, tell me. But I'm genuinely curious what you guys think. And I also want to hear some other AD trade ideas because I do think that's a direction the Lakers could end up going before the deadline. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. We are going to take the rest of the weekend off, and then we'll be back Monday to talk about the MVP showdown between Nikola Jokic and Jason Tatum. As always, I sincerely appreciate your guys' support, and I'll see you guys on Monday.